Good afternoon. Good afternoon, guys. Hello. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to have that confirmation that you guys are able to hear me. So I see it's already 3 minutes after 2, and we are supposed to have started at 1400 hours, which is 2 p.m. So let me take this opportunity to welcome you all to BEC 524. I know there may be some who are taking BEC, actually BEC 324. Apologies for that. It's supposed to be it's actually BEC 324. I know there are some who are taking BEC 321 who are in this session. So those for BEC 321, on my class list, I saw there's only one student on the official ITS class list for BEC 321. So we will be attending together with those who are taking BEC 321. I'm sure if you went through your learning guide, you know the differences. BEC 321, it's an 8-credit module which we are phasing out. So they will also have 2 tests and 1 assignment. However, those that are taking BEC 324, they have their 2 tests and 2 assignments. My name is Tendai, that's my first name, and my surname is Chimcheka. I will be the lecturer and course coordinator for this particular module, Business Research and Marketing Research, for those who are taking BEC 321. In East London campus, we also have the same module with the course code BEC 324E and BEC 321E. Angela Pike is taking the module there. So here and there, you may see that some communications may actually come from Angela, and some communications I will be posting them. The purpose of this session basically is for us to touch base, to know where we are, and for you guys to also ask if you have any questions. But before I give you the opportunity to ask questions, it is important for me to state clearly to all of us that the learning material has been posted on Blackboard. Actually, it was posted last week on Blackboard. So your learning guide is available on Blackboard. Your assignment 1, which will be due soon, is already on Blackboard. And I'm sure some are already working on it. Then there's also a folder with slides that have a voiceover. Those slides were prepared for you. They cover the course content for both BEC 324 and BEC 321. So you just need to know the aspects that you ought to cover for your module. If you are taking BEC 324, it's everything basically. But if you are taking BEC 321, that's where you need to be careful on which slides you should pay attention to and which slides you may actually ignore. So the slides that are available for you, they have a voiceover from Prof. Elliot, who is a colleague still in the department. We took the module together last year. He was also supposed to be taking the module in East London. So the lectures are already prepared for you. my role, my duty will basically be to come and to answer questions for aspects that we will already have covered as per the recordings that are made available for you in that folder with slides that have a voiceover. I've also noticed that those slides with voiceovers are not actually arranged per chapter. So I've also uploaded slides that are arranged per chapter, where you can clearly see what you're supposed to cover for chapter 1 to chapter 15. Taking note also that we will not be covering anything in chapter 11 because it explains what you should do when you are basically collecting data. That is common knowledge. We will not cover theory there because it is something that is straightforward. Another thing that I should also just bring to your attention is that the prescribed textbook is available in the, you can find it in your learning guide and also in the document with important information that we made available for you on Blackboard. So we prescribed the 4th edition of that textbook, but I know that most of you may have access to the 3rd edition. There are no major differences between the 3rd and the 4th edition. So if you have access to the 3rd edition of the textbook, you can still feel free to use that particular text. Take note also of how your DP will be calculated for BEC 3 to 4. And also take note of the test and assignment dates. Take note also of the test and assignment dates. Those are actually available in both the learning guide and also on the 2-pager document which is available on Blackboard. I see Sia Sanga is asking, on the voiceover on Blackboard, there is no sound. There is sound. However, if you are having challenges, I will help you to actually go through that. There is sound. Those slides actually work. We used them. We tested them. It actually works. So maybe on your PowerPoint, look for where there is a speaker on your PowerPoint and press play. It will actually play the voiceover for that particular slide. So you may need to do that from slide to slide. It will not play automatically. Okay, so coming to the assignments, one assignment is already out for you guys, which is assignment 1. And I know some of you are already working on it. I just need to put this as caution to everyone in the class that we are aware of some malpractices that students engage in when they are working on their assignments, particularly during this time of online learning. We are aware, so don't try to play tricks. I know there are already means and ways of trying to cheat, trying to play around, turn it in. In some cases, we may ask you to actually submit these via Turnitin or through a Turnitin link. And I know there are tricks already that some of you have used, that some of you will be introduced to, and you try to use them. We are aware of those. And this is an externally moderated paper, not paper as such. This is an externally moderated module. So all your tests and all your assignments will be externally moderated. So just as a way to caution everyone, before anyone is a culprit or before anyone is a suspect, we are aware of how students are cheating, and we will be looking out for those for those means that some of you have already used to cheat. So you may have succeeded in other modules, but I just have to caution you that in this module, it may not work. So if you are one of those that are putting quotes in white, or you're actually putting them in that color white so that we may not be able to pick it, and so that Turnitin will not be able to pick similarity index, that we are already aware of that particular trick. And if you try to do it, unfortunately, you will go through the plagiarism commit for the department, and they will deal with you there. I will not waste my time as the lecturer. I will take you to that committee. There are also others that are using some paraphrasing softwares. We are also aware of those, and we can be able to tell you which one you have used. But once we pick it, we will also refer you to that plagiarism committee. They will deal with you. If they cannot be lenient with you, they may also take you to the disciplinary committee. I'm sure we are all aware that plagiarism is a punishable offense, and we take it seriously, both at university level and also at departmental level. So for purposes of this module, we will enforce those plagiarism penalties. Some have already been clearly stated in your text, in your learning guide, and we are aware that there are students who may try to cheat, even Turnitin itself. So don't be found on the wrong side of those laws or rules by trying to cheat. We are already aware. We are also aware of students who are paying other people to do assessments or assignments for them. We also have a way to track that and inform you who has actually done it for you. And some are actually doing it in a way that we cannot describe, whereby you'll find that 3 or 4 people have basically submitted the same assignment. And if you ask them, they didn't copy each other, but the source of that particular assignment is basically the same computer, the same place, the same person. So be on the lookout for that, and don't think you can cheat us. You will not be able to succeed. So my word of advice is take learning as your own responsibility. It is your own responsibility. So ours is to ensure that learning takes place. And where we see that there are some tendencies of cheating, we will not hesitate to take you to relevant committees. So I thought I should just say it before anything happens, when we are still in good books, when everything is still fine, that do not be tempted to cheat, be it in tests, be it in your assignments. Is there anyone with a question? If you have a question, you can use that icon to raise your hand so that we can be able to see you. I see Songeso is asking a question. How many credits are allocated for BEC 324? This information is available in the faculty prospectus. But just as a way of providing information, BEC 324 has 16 credits. It has 16 credits. BEC 321 has 8 credits. I think I have answered that question. Anyone with a question? You can use the chat box. You can also raise up your hand so that we can give you the opportunity to ask your question. If you have a question, please, can you indicate before we move on to something else? Okay, it appears no one has a question concerning what I have said. That may mean two things. It's either you read everything that was provided on Blackboard and you understood everything. It may also mean that you do not have an idea of what we are talking about, so you cannot contribute anything, neither can you ask anything. So if you are in the second category, it will be advisable that you actually go on Blackboard, download this material, and start working on it so that we will be on the same page. We don't expect people to fail. This is a final year module. So if you work hard, you will make it. But if you do not work hard, definitely failure will be guaranteed. Since there are no questions, and since people do not have anything to ask, I will just take you through, briefly, take you through chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. Hopefully, people will ask questions so that we can engage, because this is something that you guys have already listened to. This is something that you have already gone through, and you should be having questions, or you should have prepared questions regarding these issues. So in chapter 1, basically what we are looking for, or what we are looking at, are perspectives on marketing research. Marketing research, this module is offered at third year level, which is the level at which you guys are taking it. And the purpose of this module is to introduce you to marketing research so that you will have an idea of why marketing research is important to organizations, how it should be conducted, the principles governing it, means to do it, like the methodology to do it, issues to do with ethics, how do they come into play in conducting research, how is that information useful, and how is it used in organizations, which is part of what you guys will also look at when you focus on other modules such as strategy and other functional areas in business management. So the moment you finish this particular module, you should be in a position to actually initiate research projects. You should also be in a position to actually implement research projects. You should have an idea of how research is conducted. You should be in a position also to actually draw up research reports. So you should be in a position to initiate a research project, like draw up a research proposal, conduct research. You should also be in a position to draw up a research report, which can be in the form of a research paper, research report in general, which will be used in an organization. If it's in terms of academic, you should be in a position to write up a thesis or to write up a dissertation. So you should have that basic knowledge so that you can actually use, be it in the academic environment or even in the business or in industry environment. So the main purpose of conducting marketing research is to find information which will then be used for decision making. So decision making is important. In any organization, managers are responsible for making decisions, or effective managers actually make decisions. And what separates good decisions from those that are not so good is the information that is available to management when they make decisions. So marketing research becomes key in providing information for decision making. Another point is coming in to say internal and external environmental information reduces risks and helps in decision making. So when you're making decisions, you need information about the internal environment, which is that particular environment, that environment within the organization, and also external environment, which is that environment which you cannot control, that environment which is outside of the organization. To put it in simple terms, the external environment can be in the form of your market environment or your macro environment. But the internal environment, that will be your micro environment. So you need information from both the internal environment and external environment to be able to make decisions as a manager. And this information needs to be appropriate and also in the correct format that it can be used for decision making. So if it's random figures that are not analyzed to make any sense, that may not be useful to managers. So researchers need to convert that data, which some of you pronounce as data, depending on where you're coming from. You need to be in a position to analyze it so that it becomes information and so that it can be useful for decision making in any organization or in any setting. Then we also need to know about the marketing information system. There are many anyway. These are used to gather, to sift, and to analyze or to store data or information that will be available to managers. So you can actually make use of these softwares or these systems to manage and to analyze data. I see there's someone who raised a hand. Let me just give them an opportunity. I can't see from my side who have raised a hand, but there was that indication. Is there anyone who wants to say something? You can go ahead. Okay. Once there's anyone who wants to say something, please indicate. I saw there's someone who raised a hand, but suddenly it disappeared. This slide is just emphasizing that marketing information is crucial for the organization if it is to develop products or and strategies that keep pace with the changing environment. The business environment is constantly changing, so managers will also need information to keep abreast with the changes in the business environment or with changes in the macro environment, market environment, even also in the micro environment. And that information is actually obtained through marketing research. So we need marketing information as managers to make effective decisions and also to keep abreast with what is transpiring or obtaining on the ground or in the market or in the environment in general. Marketing research has two main purposes. That is to get information about the customer, and also customers can actually express their views or perceptions, which would then influence decision making. But now when we say marketing research has two purposes, if you analyze that information which is coming from the slides, directly from the slides which are also used in your textbook, you will see that it's more or less the same thing. So what are those two purposes? Marketing research can be used to identify opportunities. It can also be used to solve problems. So it can either be problem solving, it can also be used to identify opportunities. If you read some textbooks, they will also indicate to you that marketing research serves two purposes. One will be to identify problems, and the other one will be to solve problems. So it can either be problem identification or problem solving. So marketing research is important into any organization or to any manager. This figure, which is also in your textbook, shows a link between the organization and the customer and the role of marketing research. So marketing research helps the organization to know about the perceptions, views, experiences, and so forth of the customers. It can also be used to provide information to the customers. So it can also be used to inform customers. I'm sure you, at some point in time, have read documents or marketing reports from certain organizations so that you know what is actually happening in that particular organization. But when we read it, you were not a manager for that organization. You were basically a customer and you got information about what is happening, what is most likely to happen, and how it is most likely to affect you as a customer. So marketing research benefits both the managers of the organization. It is also of benefit to the customers or to the society. This is where also that issue of ethics, which you guys looked at in chapter 2, comes into play. That when you conduct research, you should not actually do it to disadvantage the customers or to disadvantage the society. It should be of benefit to the society or to the customers. Here it's saying the purpose of marketing of a marketing department. The slide uses the term job, but it's supposed to be purpose. Those that did marketing management at second year level, where you focused on that as a function of the business, you would have learned that the purpose of the marketing department briefly is to anticipate environmental changes that may likely to happen in the business environment or in the marketing environment, and also to predict the direction and impact of those changes. To what extent are they likely to impact on the firm's offering to the market? And obviously to plan accordingly. What is it then that we as an organization ought to do so that we will survive or we will not be negatively affected by those threats that are posed by the external environment or by the weaknesses that we encounter in the internal environment? What can we do to change that? So that is actually part also of the marketing department. I'm sure those that did marketing management also know that they also strive to understand how they can satisfy customers, how they can satisfy consumers. That forms part of what should an organization do so that it is not affected by those environmental changes. If customers' preferences are anticipated to change, what should we do as an organization to ensure that we remain on course and we will not collapse? Management needs information about all possible internal and external environmental factors that can influence the organization's marketing affairs and also results. So you need to know as a manager what is transpiring in the external environment, what is transpiring in the internal environment, how can it affect us as an organization, and obviously what should we do to ensure that if there are any threats, what should we do to ensure that we are not negatively affected? But if there are opportunities, what can we do to ensure that we make maximum use of those opportunities for the benefit of the organization? Functions of marketing research. Marketing research can be descriptive, just to give a description of the current situation. It can also be diagnostic, where you try to find the effects of certain events in a given situation. It can also be predictive, to see, okay, if this happens, what then is most likely to happen? What will be the effects? What will be the results? So it can also be predictive. Then there is this particular slide where you're supposed to focus on data and information. I think this is common knowledge that we shouldn't be focusing on at this level. But since you guys will be tested on it, it's important for us to ensure that we emphasize that data and information are two different things. Data refers to all available statistics, opinions, facts, and predictions. These are not processed. So some refer to data as unprocessed information. That is, if you are to define it in general. But information is that data component that is relevant to solving a certain problem in an organization or in any setting. Your textbook describes it as that component, that data component that is relevant to the decision in question. So some see information as processed or analyzed data, which can actually be used, which is relevant in solving problems in an organization. So that difference is important. Although it's common knowledge, it is important for us to emphasize that there is a difference between data and information. That will also be emphasized when you look at the research process, the steps that you follow when you are conducting research. Because there is a point in time where you need to collect data. Even after you have collected it, it may not make sense. You cannot use it for decision making. You will need to analyze it. You will need to properly organize it so that you put it in that form which can then be used for decision making. In this case now, we need to look at the definition and scope of marketing research. One of many definitions, which basically means there are many definitions. You will need to also read your prescribed text to see the prescribed definition, which I think should be on the following slide. Marketing research is defined as the function that links the consumer, customer, and public to the marketer through information. And in this case, information is used to identify and to define marketing opportunities and problems, to generate, refine, and evaluate marketing actions, to also monitor marketing performance, and to improve understanding of marketing as a process. As a process, not as a task. So this is the definition that you then find in your textbook, where marketing research is defined as the systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of information about all marketing problems by means of recognized scientific methods to provide information that marketing management can use in the decision-making process. So it's not an issue of just collecting data. You use whatever methods that you think should be appropriate. This should be properly organized using recognized scientific methods. So you will find out as we move on with this module that there are different research approaches, there are different research methods, and those they become relevant in certain settings. And they become applicable in certain settings. You cannot just use them anyhow or as you wish. So you need to clearly understand that research process to say, okay, if you are following a positivist paradigm, what research approach will then become relevant? What research approach will then become applicable? If you choose to use a quantitative research approach or a qualitative research approach, what research design will then become relevant or applicable? Is it descriptive Is it exploratory? Is it explanatory? And if you use that quantitative research, what data analysis methods can you use? What data collection methods can you use? You can't use them anyhow. So for purposes of this module, you need to clearly understand. I know when we reach to that stage where we look at the research process, it may appear as a straightforward case, but you need to know which one applies where. Where can you use which method? It's not an issue of just closing your eyes and choose randomly. It doesn't work that way. Okay, and then there is also, we need to also understand the differences between basic research versus applied research. Basic research, it's more academic, generates information about aspects of the marketing system, but not applied to marketing management process. So it's generally based on a hypothesis and a theory. So it's more academic. But there's applied research, which is aimed at helping management to make better decisions about a specific aspect, which can be an opportunity or a problem. And the research is conducted to solve a particular problem that is more specific to an organization or to that particular organization. I know some would then think that no, so it's basic research, you may just choose whatever you may want. No, both applied and basic research, they use scientific methods. They both use scientific methods. So if, in any of those two, you still need to justify your methodology. You still need to understand clearly that research process and to be able to justify why you are using this particular method over another. And for you to be able to say, no, I'm using quantitative instead of qualitative, definitely you need to be knowing both. You need to be knowing advantages and disadvantages of both, where each of those two are applicable, so that you can be able to choose one which is most applicable in your own case. Then this basically explains the application of science in research, techniques that will then be used, that risk is reduced through analysis and interpretation of empirical data, that it ought to be analyzed. But what is more important for me in this, on this slide are actually the basic steps that are followed in scientific research. That one needs to be able to identify a problem. So as I said earlier, research may be conducted to solve a problem or to actually identify a problem. So you need to be in a position to identify it. Even if you want to solve it, you must at least have identified it. Then the other step would then be to design a study. How do you intend to conduct it? Which methodologies are you going to follow? How are you going to collect the data? Then once that is done, and even the instrument has been designed, the instrument that you are going to use to collect data, if it's a questionnaire, if it's an interview schedule, it should also be designed at that stage. Then the following step would then be to conduct the research, which involves field work, where you actually go to the field to collect data using whatever instrument that you will be using. If it's a survey, maybe you use your interview schedule or your questionnaire. If it's observation, you go on that particular setting, you observe. If it's an experiment, you also get into that environment which will allow you for an experiment. So you conduct that particular experiment. Then that will then be followed by testing the hypothesis. Testing the hypothesis will also have been formulated after identifying the problem. After you test the hypothesis, obviously you make your conclusions and you report the results. So this is the basic steps. But I think the actual steps that we expect you guys to know are actually 11. There is an 11-step process for the marketing research process that you guys ought to know. I think that is in chapter 3. But for this particular chapter, it's just giving an overview of what is expected, what should be followed, what steps are followed when you are conducting scientific research. But it is important for you to understand these 5 steps. You need to know the 11 steps. You need to know the 11-step process for marketing research process. Okay, then this slide is basically giving the differences between scientific and non-scientific methods that influence the validity and reliability of marketing research. So it's important for me to emphasize that in this particular module, we are mainly focusing on scientific research. Scientific research. So there should be that element of objectivity as opposed to subjectivity. There should also be emphasis on accuracy of measurement instruments. If you are to collect data, what instruments are you using? To what extent do they measure what they are supposed to measure? Emphasis on continuous and comprehensive research, also in scientific research. Then there are also characteristics of good research, that the research problem should have been clearly defined, methodology should be described in detail so that we know the methods that were used and why they were used. It should have been properly planned and procedures should be followed if they are supposed to be. Data analysis methods that are able to review the significance of the collected data. Use proper data analysis methods. Not to say you've conducted quantitative research, then you want to use qualitative data analysis methods. It doesn't work that way. You need to know which data analysis methods are applicable for that particular setting, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. How do you analyze that data? Then research conclusions should also be provided. You can't say you have provided a good research report when there is no conclusion. Normally, managers will need those conclusions and recommendations so that they can also make proper decisions. So those also ought to be provided in the research report. And any research that is conducted, in most cases, there will be limitations or delimitations. Those should clearly be stated. They should not be hidden. They should clearly be stated so that managers, when they are making decisions, they also know the delimitations or the limitations of that particular research. Sometimes we may end up making decisions based on research that was conducted in an environment that is totally different from where we are, and think that those decisions should still work. But in some cases where settings are different, perceptions of people will also be different. So you may need to conduct a totally new study in that particular setting. I think that will also become clear when we look at the differences between primary data and secondary data and the shortcomings of secondary data, which we have been collected in other settings to solve other problems. Okay, then there are factors that should be considered when conducting research. This chapter or this your textbook provides 5, the issue of time limits. What time? How much time is available to conduct research? So in some cases you may find that time may be limited, and people will end up using certain methods to quickly gather data, analyze it because they need to finish it within a specified period of time. That may also pose as a delimitation of the study. Availability of data. For instance, in cases where secondary data is sufficient, there may not be any need to conduct primary research. But in cases where secondary data is not sufficient, there may obviously be need to conduct research, primary research, so that you can get the information. The nature of the decision that is to be made also need to be considered, as that will also inform the type of research and the costs that can be incurred by the organization. Then we should also look at the advantages versus the disadvantages, or the costs versus the benefits. Because research is expensive, so if we are to conduct it, definitely it should be of value to the organization. It should be of benefit to the organization. We cannot just put resources down the drain in the name of research. Then the issue of resources available. Once you want to conduct research, research ought to be conducted properly with enough resources. So you cannot commit to conduct research when you definitely know that the resources that you have are not enough and will not be enough to conduct such a project. So in that case, the issue of resources will also become key in making a decision, or as a factor to be considered when you want to embark on marketing research. So I know you have already listened also to the voiceovers by Prof. Elliot. I will open this time for questions, for those that have questions to ask. Questions? I know I was not supposed to have taken you slide by slide because that was already done. You guys were supposed to have already listened to the slides that are provided for you on Blackboard. But I thought of it necessary that we do it so that we move on the same page. Anyone with a question? Okay, if there are no questions for chapter 1, we can also go through chapter 2, which is focusing on research ethics. Chapter 2, which is focusing on research ethics. So ethics, these are basically a set of principles or rules and norms of conduct for correct behavior. There is normally that debate to say, can there be anything that is ethical but not legal? Or can there be something that is legal but not ethical? There is normally that debate. But generally speaking, ethics speak to that behavior that is generally acceptable in society. Practices that are generally acceptable in society. So you may find that in certain societies, there are things that are generally acceptable, but they may not be legal. Then there are also things that may actually be legal, permissible by law, but they are not generally acceptable in society. There are examples that are quickly coming into my mind, but I will avoid using those and maybe ask from you guys to give me examples where we can have ethical dilemmas, where something is permissible by law, but is not generally acceptable by society. Or something is generally acceptable by society, but it's not permissible by law. Are there any such situations that you guys can think of, where something is actually acceptable in society, but is not allowed by law? Yes, Piwe.
Yes, I think one of the examples is gayism. You see, gayism is accepted by law in South Africa, but according to the situation where we live in our societies, it's not necessarily acceptable because some people they are not given the way, or they are not treated the way they should be treated because of their gayism or something.
Oh, okay, yes, that is one perfect example that by law it may be permissible, or by law it is permissible, it is legal, but in society or in some societies, it is not acceptable. So that is one example where we may have those ethical dilemmas. Any other example? Any other example? Okay, I think the example that was given is enough to paint a picture to show that there are certain aspects which may be legally permissible by law, or which may be permissible by law, but in society they may not be accepted. So as marketing managers or as managers, we also need to take that into account when we are making decisions. There are things that we may think by law we are allowed to do, but those things may actually paint a totally different picture to our society or to the society. So we need to take that into consideration. Coming back to marketing research, it is also important that whenever organizations or whenever individuals are conducting research, they do it in an ethical manner. That is to say, they ought not to do anything that is illegal. Everything that they should do should be legal. But they should also do it ethically. That is in a way that is generally acceptable by the society to which that research is conducted. So you will see if you go through those slides, the ones with the voiceover, that there are actually certain rights that respondents have. Those people that complete questionnaires, they have certain rights. And as researchers or as managers, we also emphasize on the responsibilities that the researchers have. So as a marketing research student, you ought to know the responsibilities that you have as a researcher, and also the rights that you should not in any way infringe that the respondents have. So I know many times you guys have been given questionnaires to complete by people who were collecting data, and they forced you to complete those. But truly speaking, that is unethical. Because what will then happen is people will just complete questionnaires for the sake of completing them and providing false information, which will then be used to make decisions. So just imagine a situation whereby false information is used to make a decision in an organization. The wastage in terms of resources, it's just not good. So it is important that as researchers, whenever we conduct research, we actually do it ethically, respecting the rights that the respondents have. So there are a lot of rights that you will find in the textbook that the researchers have. Like they've the right to privacy, they've the right to confidentiality, that even their names and the information that they provide should not be disclosed and be attached to their names. So when, as a researcher, you now need to know what will you then do to ensure that you are not in any way infringing on the respondents' rights. Then the researchers also have obligations. They also have obligations. One of the obligations, obviously, is to ensure that you inform your respondents on the purpose of the research. Another obligation, obviously, is to ensure issues to do with informed consent, to ensure that before you collect any information from anyone, you actually seek their informed consent, be it verbal or in writing. Then you also have an obligation not to misrepresent. That is, anyone who is collecting data should inform the respondents the purpose for which that research is conducted. So if you go through your textbook, if you go through the slides, you will realize that there are responsibilities that you as researchers, or that researchers should actually abide with. Then there are also rights that the respondents have, and those rights should never in any way be infringed, because once they are infringed, the research project may not be successful. Yes, they can complete the questionnaires, but they may provide wrong information. Okay, so ethics basically speaks to the set of principles or rules and norms of conduct for correct behavior. So we're speaking of moral behavior and the values and principles that guide it. These are broader than the legal laws of society. So as we said, you may realize that there are certain things that may be permissible by law, but may still not be acceptable in society. When we're speaking of ethics, we are speaking of the application of moral rules or codes of conduct during the planning, conducting, and also during the reporting of research. So in terms of research, or in terms of marketing research, another funny thing that normally happens is people get paid to conduct research, but because they may not be ethical, not necessarily to say they will conduct research in an unethical manner, but simply because whoever is conducting research is not ethical, they may just decide to maybe a certain organization is conducting research and they want to understand views or perceptions of students on a certain topical issue. Then they choose you as one of their data collectors, just to move around campus collecting data from students, giving out questionnaires to students so that students can complete them. But because because one of you, or because you may not be ethical as a person, you may just decide to go to your room and complete all the questionnaires. We have seen it happening from people who are very unethical. They will complete questionnaires without fear. Then they will provide those questionnaires for data analysis. They will be analyzed, and a research report will be produced and used for decision making. So I think from that example, you can actually see the need for ethical research. To say, if you are to conduct research as a manager, you ought to ensure that it is conducted in an ethical manner. Because if it's done in an unethical manner, definitely there was no need for that research. Some may also conduct research properly, ethically. Then they analyze the results. And when they realize that what is coming out of the research is not that pleasing and it's not good for the organization, they decide to falsify the research findings. That is very unethical. That is unacceptable. Because even if you falsify the findings in the research report, the managers will then use that information. So they will not know where they ought to correct. They will not know the proper courses of action that they should take to ensure the success of the organization. So that will also be another investment or another money that will have just been wasted or put down the drain. So there is need to ensure that research is conducted ethically. The issue of plagiarism also forms part of ethical behavior. So if you are one of those that when they are given a task, you ask someone to do it for you and you don't do it yourself, but you have the audacity to actually take the document and submit it as yours when it's not you who have completed it. And also sign a declaration that it's you who have done it, it's my own original work, when it's not your own original work. That will also mean you are unethical. And once you are unethical at this stage, it will be very difficult to become ethical at any level. So it's important that we enforce ethical behavior at this stage to ensure success at all other levels. Piwe, you can go ahead.
Sir, you're talking about being ethical and being unethical. Sir, I want to know if it's ethical to code something when you're doing a research, to code something that was written in a book by someone else, and also you quote it, sir, and then you paste it on your research. Is that being ethical?
Okay, in terms of research, obviously there may be nothing new that you may be looking at. Something that you are trying to find out may have one or two people worked on it. So there is nothing wrong in taking someone's work and use it in your research. But whenever you use someone's work, you should properly reference it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Either to say according to so and so, and you provide who you are quoting, so that you are not claiming their own findings to become your own findings. For as long as you cite appropriately, that remains ethical. The problem comes when you take someone's work and you claim that it is your own finding. That is unethical. So from your bringing it to taking it out of research and bringing it to academic progress, if you are given an assignment and you take certain statements from somewhere or from someone and you claim that those statements are yours, and it's easy to claim that something is yours, you don't need to say these statements are mine, you just need not to reference. So once you do not reference, you are saying it's your own direct words. So that way it will become unethical. So part of ethical behavior for a researcher is acknowledging the source. Acknowledging the source of information. That is part of ethical behavior. Are you answered?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I'm answered. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Okay, objectives of ethics basically to protect participants, because there are people and organizations that are not so good. They only want to get information from participants at the expense of participants for the benefit of themselves or their organizations. So respondents also need to be protected. Research process is conducted in a way that serves the interests of the participants. The respondents, those that will actually complete the research process, they need to be protected. Also, there is need to ensure the ethical soundness of the research process, to ensure that it was conducted in an ethical manner, in a way that is generally acceptable. That alone is important. So ethics are crucial for the success of any research project. Some research reports should be discarded or are actually discarded simply because they ignored a very crucial ethical principle. So it is important for every business management student or every business research student to have an appreciation and an understanding of those ethical principles. Issues to do with informed consent. That when someone just doesn't want to participate in your research project, they don't want. And you don't need to force them. That understanding to just know that no, when results come out the way they are, they should be reported the way they are. You don't need to falsify them. That is crucial for the success of any research project. Ethical behavior also promotes the aims of the research, the values such as trust, accountability, respect, and fairness. Those are some of the ethical values that are crucial for the success of any research project. Researchers should be held responsible and accountable for their behavior. So if you cheat in one way or another, you should be held responsible, even as a researcher. I will not mention, but I'm sure you guys know that there are people who had their qualifications withdrawn by institutions of higher learning simply because they plagiarized documents that made them to be accorded of those qualifications. A full professor losing professorship simply because they plagiarized their dissertation. Those cases have happened. Researchers losing their jobs simply because they falsified research results, or they engaged in some unethical research practices. So there is need to be ethical. Ethical behavior ethics will also determine whether you will receive funding for your research. So all those that fund research, organizations that fund research, they want to know whether that research will be conducted ethically, and if you say yes, they also need to know how. So for you to know, to say yes, you need to also know the how part. So you can't say yes when you don't know the ethical principles, when you don't know the rights of the respondents, when you don't know the obligations that you have as a researcher. Ethical behavior also, ethical research also promotes morals and values such as social responsibility, human rights, animal welfare, and compliance. So whenever you are conducting research, like at the University of Fort Hare, if you say you want to conduct research, you should also apply for ethical clearance. And when in that application, you should show how you will respect the rights of the respondents, how you will ensure that you abide with your own obligations as a researcher. That information will be needed. So you need to know the ethical principles, your obligations as researchers, also the rights that the respondents have. That information is also crucial even when you want to complete someone's questionnaire. You can actually see on whether they are doing it ethically or unethically. So if it's being done unethically, you can distance yourself from it. If it's ethically, you can participate in it. Codes and policies for research ethics, there are a number of code of conduct for research ethics. They are different depending on which one you are following. If you read in your textbook, you will realize that there are different codes of conduct. But what your textbook does is to provide a summary of those key principles that should be followed or that researchers should abide in. And it's part of those principles are those that are appearing on the slide, like issues to do with integrity, honesty, human protection, animal care, legality, to ensure that whatever that you are doing is actually legally permissible. Non-discrimination, beneficence, social responsibility, confidentiality, issues to do with informed consent, and so forth. Three core ethical principles that are we still together? I think I was taken out a bit, but I'm back now. Okay, then also the ethical issues that concern participants, that you should not deceive your respondents, seek informed consent. They should agree voluntarily to participate in a study, access that researchers may need specific individuals either to interview them. So those that you want to interview, you should also have access to those people. They need also to be debriefed so that they know exactly what they are putting themselves into without being cheated, without being deceived. Privacy, it remains there, it remains a respondent's right, and it should be respected. The same with confidentiality, and where there is conflict of interest, it should also be declared by the researcher. Also, there is issues of informed consent and anonymity to ensure that when I provide my information as a respondent, when I provide my views on a particular matter as a respondent, I should be protected. So it should not be a case whereby I ask you as research participants on a certain matter, then in my research report, I then write your name to say you actually said A, B, C about this issue. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable because that may put respondents at risk. So research should be done also to protect, it should be part of the research aims to protect the respondents or to protect the research participants. So it remains your responsibility as students who will be tested on this particular matter to know all the ethical principles, the rights of respondents, and also the obligations of the researchers. That is important for you guys. Are there any people with questions? Are there any questions? Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, I'm happy we covered chapter 1 and chapter 2 in the live session. So please also take time to listen to the slides with voiceovers. This recording will also be made available for you so that you can also have access to it together with those that may have missed this particular session. So next week, we will then look at the questions. We will now be focusing more on questions. So it is advisable that you guys go and listen and work also on the slides that are available for you for chapter 3, chapter 4, and chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. So that in our next live interaction, we will then focus on those chapters so that we will at least cover until chapter 7 next week, which is according to the schedule that you guys have. Which is according to the schedule that you guys have. So can we have questions, or if there's anyone who has something to say, I think this will be the most appropriate time. Another thing also that we should discuss is the issue of the class rep, the class representative. If there are no questions, we will need to discuss the issue of the class rep. In terms of the class rep, we will need someone who volunteers to become the class representative. Do we have any volunteers, or you guys already have your class rep? If you already have a class rep for the third year class, please let me know so that I know who is the class rep. Do we have a class rep for the third year class? I see Walter, your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Yes, I can volunteer to be the class rep for BEC 3324. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Are there any seconders? Those that are in support of Walter to become the class rep? If you second, you can just indicate by raising up your hand. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, because I know some of them just say, no, you just volunteered. But at least there were more than 5 people seconding. So we are all in support. I will get your details after the session so that whenever there is an issue concerning the class, at least I know who to contact. So thank you so much. We will meet next week, same time. But it will mainly be to answer your questions, not for you guys to come and be quiet in the session. Thank you so much.